Good morning. How are you? I am super duper excited about today's show because it's all about the kids. And we just have so many fun ideas. You know, I'm a big believer of getting those kids in the kitchen early. I was, a gal asked me recently about some advice that I have to new moms. And one of my pieces of advice is don't try and be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. Don't sweat the small stuff. I mean, things are going to go wrong. They do go wrong. The key is just don't freak out about it and, you know, learn from your mistakes and move on. But one of my other big things that I tell new moms is get those kids in the kitchen and get them in there early and have fun. Make it fun. And then before you know it, they're going to be cooking you dinner. And I promise you, it really does happen. I have a picture of my kids in the kitchen. And I think Ireland was barely, and I'll have to bring it in sometime because it's pinned up on my desk on my bulletin board, and I always smile when I look at it. Ireland could barely walk. I mean, I think she was just walking. And Riley was about 5. My kids are about 5 years apart. And they're up on a stool in the kitchen, and they're licking the beaters. Also, let those kids lick the beaters every once in a while. You know what? I never heard of anyone who died from licking beaters. But anyway, what you do is you get them a little drawer in the kitchen and you put a few little utensils, maybe your old utensils. You don't have to go out and buy, you know, all new utensils for the kids, but give them some little stuff, maybe get them an apron and make it fun. And I always start with treats. You know, get them interested in making the treats, the chocolate chip cookies and the, you know, box cake mix and things like that. And then the next thing you know, when you're making dinner, Ireland's always, you know, she was pulling up a stool. Now she's almost as tall as me. But anyway, she's always in there with me, sometimes even when I don't want her in there with me, if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they make a mess in the kitchen. They do. But that's what vacuums and dogs are for. That's my big philosophy. So today's show, as I said, is all about the kids and getting them in the kitchen with you. They learn so much from how to measure to, you know, just so many things. Memories happen in the kitchen. They really do. So anyway, we have some treats we're going to make today, and we're going to start with actually a great kid-friendly dinner that they look like treats. We're actually going to make mini meatloafs, and we're going to do them. They're going to look like cupcakes. It's just so darn cute. So I'm going to give my hands a wash, and we're going to get to work on these cupcakes. Meatloaf cupcakes. This may sound weird. Stick with me. You're going to know what's going on in just a little bit. We're basically going to make mini meatloafs in cupcake tins, and we're going to frost them with mashed potatoes. So just, if you're saying, what in the world is she talking about? Has she lost it? Just stick with me a little bit, and trust me, cutest thing ever for adults and kids. So we're starting out with 2 pounds of ground beef. And I always think a little bit more fat in that ground beef, actually for meatloafs and things like that, actually makes it better, and it's more tender. So, you know, you don't have to go for, you know, ground sirloin or anything like that. So 2 pounds, basically. I've got a 1/4 cup of milk, and I wash my hands because I want to be able to get right in there with the meatloaf. Now, my grandmother, Nana, she was actually my great-grandmother, who lived to 104. So I always tease Bob and say, I'm going to be around for a long time. You're stuck with me. So she always put 1 packet of just the dry onion soup mix in her meatloaf. So to this day, most of my meatloaf recipes have this in them. It just gives this meatloaf a lot of great flavor, and it does it the easy way. You don't have to cut up onions and do all that kind of stuff. So far we have 1/4 cup of milk, 2 pounds of ground beef, 1 envelope of dry onion soup mix, 2 beaten eggs, which is going to bind this whole thing together, and I'm going to beat those separately in a bowl so that we don't get any shell in here. See? Got a little shell. I played it safe and it paid off this time. I once had a little girl over to the house, one of Ireland's friends, and we were making, I don't know what we were making, brownies or cookies or something, and it came time where, you know, we had made all of our cookies or whatever we were making, and there was just a little bit in the bowl, and then the beaters, and Ireland, of course. Mom, can we lick the beaters? And the little girl looked at me and said, oh, I've never done that before. My mom's never let me do that. And I said, well, step on up and have one. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm going to get a phone call. I never did. But you know what? I've never seen a little girl so happy. So, all right, so 2 beaten eggs. whatever it takes to make kids fall in love with cooking. And then I'm going to use a different kind of breadcrumb to bind this all together. I've fallen in love with something called Panko Breadcrumbs, and they used to be a little bit hard to find. They're not hard to find at all anymore. If you can't find them, ask anybody at Festival Foods. They'll point them out to where they are in the store. But they're just a really great breadcrumb that I use a lot for casserole toppings. They make a great casserole topping. They make a great crunch to bake macaroni and cheese. They're great to dip, make your own homemade chicken strips with. They're coat fish with if you're frying fish. And they're just got a lot of crunch to them, and they really work nicely. A cup of those in here. Now, if you can't find those, they come in a box, they come in a bag, they come in a lot of different ways. They're not expensive, but they're a fun thing to experiment with and do different things with. So if you haven't, heard of them, give them a try. They're fun. But if you can't find those, I would use about a half a cup of just dried, seasoned Italian breadcrumbs. That would work great too. Or just some torn up bread. Sandwich bread would work fine too. It's all going to work, and it's all going to taste great in here. And then I usually do a couple dashes of Worcestershire sauce in my meatloaf just to give it a little bit of flavor. And then you just got to get in there and get busy. I'm going to first line a cupcake tin. Now this makes about 12 mini meatloaves with some foil, and this is really important, foil cupcake liners. If you didn't have the liners and you didn't want to run out and get them, you could also just spray these cupcake tins with cooking spray or pan release spray, actually would be the best, and that'll work for you too. Deb, did you short me one?
Did I?
Yes, you did. Where are the rest of them? You're fired.
They're behind you.
I'm kidding.
They're behind. That's my job security.
12, a dozen is 12, Deb.
I thought it was only 11.
Just giving her a hard time. You can hear her better now. Did you notice that? She's such a big part of the show, and one of these days we're going to get her on the show to cook with me because she's a great cook, but we mic'd her up. So anyway, okay, so now we've got all 12. See, this is a good counting lesson for the kids.
It is.
A dozen is 12. So let them, line the cupcake tins, or like I say, if you don't want to line them, go ahead and just spray them real well. Now we're going to do a little bit of a glaze to go on top because all my meatloaves have some sort of a glaze on top, and I think that's really what makes them special. And this couldn't be easier. Basically, we've got, I'm just going to get a spatula to get that out of here. I've got some ketchup, about a cup of ketchup, and a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, and that's my glaze. And when it bakes on top of the meatloaf, when I do big meatloafs, it's just yummy. So just mix that together. We're just going to spoon a little bit of this ketchup and brown sugar right on top of each of these individual meatloaves. Okay, let's get busy. Let me get my hands in here, and that's really the only way to do meatloaf, I think. So one time, this is really true, that when you get your kids in there when they're little, doing the desserts and things, when you're making dinner, they'll be coming to the kitchen to see what you're cooking and even help. So one time Ireland again was like 2 or 3, and I can't get her out of the kitchen now. I was sauteing up some portobello mushrooms, and you know how mushrooms smell so good when they're cooking? And she runs from upstairs. Mom, what smells so good? And I remember she was just a little thing. And I haven't met a lot of little kids that like mushrooms. And she says to me, I got to try whatever you're cooking. And sure enough, she ate just about every one of those sauteed portobello mushrooms. And I thought to myself, if I wouldn't have, gotten her in the kitchen early and, always gotten her curious about what I was cooking, she would have never gobbled up those mushrooms. So kind of a fun story. So not only if you're cooking with your kids, what they're smelling, the different things, they'll more than likely try. It exposes them to a lot of different foods that, it's a great way to maybe help with those picky eaters. Okay, so this is the greatest thing ever. These little portion scoops, which I use when I'm actually making cupcakes, but they're great for these little mini meatloaves. Just get them right in there into the liner. And you want to fill these up a little bit. unlike, you know, when you're making cupcakes, you kind of want to, you know, fill them up 2/3 of the way through because the cake batter, it's going to rise in that. You know, this isn't going to rise, so get that in here. And like I say, this makes about a dozen. These are really fun because if you have leftovers, you can freeze these little guys and then pop them out and just microwave them for a quick dinner. All right. And if you don't have one of these scoops, just a spoon will do. This made a little bit more than 12, so you can bake off some extra. Just kind of push it down a little bit in here. And then we're going to take a little bit of that glaze. I'm going to borrow that back one more time because I see a couple of these just didn't get quite as full as I wanted them to. You really want them almost all the way to the top. So maybe about 14 cupcakes, something like that. And then you take a little of this glaze, spoon that right on top. Kids like ketchup, right? I know mine do. And then these get into a preheated 350-degree oven. And that's the other fun thing about this. You know how meatloafs, they can take a while, sometimes, you know, an hour and a half or more. These cook in about 30 minutes. So that's the other thing. These aren't just a kid thing. If you want to make meatloafs in a hurry, this is the perfect way to do it. So just bake them in a cupcake pan. So let me show you how these come out. That glaze gets a little bit brown. And we're not done yet. Coming up next, we're going to show you how we're going to frost these babies with some mashed potatoes piped on top. Just the cutest idea. So stick with us. We'll be back. Recipe